Okay, here we go. Paper finishes. Well done for surviving this long. I won't lie, in my opinion, paper is not the most interesting material to study, but we have to because we're at the mercy of the exam board. So here we go. Right, let's do this as quickly but as comprehensively as we can. So, lamination. This is pretty straightforward because you literally have a layer of what they call substrate, is kind of like the fancy word of saying like the actual material that is being printed on. So think substrate, that's just a fancy word for paper in this instance. So what they do is they have with laminating, they have, say, the print layer here, which goes in here. Then they'll have some different coatings that might go above and below it. So a PU coating, so polyurethane coating, goes on the top. And then you might have some other films on the back as well. Now, the reason that they might do this, you can see from the GIF here, is that if you want your printing to be, if you want it to be waterproof, that's like the main reason really for laminating. If you want it to be waterproof, or you want it to be much longer lasting, or used in like an outdoor environment. So a good example for this would be if you ever go hiking and you need to take a paper map with you. So you're going into the wilds, the unknown, and you don't have GPS signal. You need to have a map that is ideally laminated, because if it rains and you're trying to read your map, the map will get absolutely soaked. So you need to have the map protected, and that way it will last for absolutely ever. Let's go on to these processes next. So I've lumped all these together because they're all very similar. So embossing and debossing. So embossing is where you have a card. If we look at a side view of it, and from that card, you'll then have like the letters or parts of it actually raised up like this. That might be part of a letter there that's actually raised up, and it's sort of pushed into place, and it uses the thickness of the card to be able to actually impress a shape into it, like it gives it a slight three-dimensional element to it. So that is embossing. Now, embossing, you need to have, you actually need to have almost like a die to be able to do this, and they call that an embossing die. And so. Yeah, what this does is it just adds a really nice effect to cards. You can see it on this business card here. It just adds like a really nice, slightly three-dimensional element. Now, debossing is exactly the same, but it just works the other way. So it might be, if you've got a card like that, it might have an imprint instead of a sort of X print, as it were, like that. So that's debossing. Now, on top of that, if you've got people who are really extra with the business cards that they want to order, which is a lot of people, they will often go for absolutely every, what we call post-processing or finishing technique you can have for papers. They will have like printed double side on laminated card with embossing, with foil, and with spot UV on it. So there's a ton of processes going on here. So embossing can be done in a range of ways. So can debossing. You can have, as shown here, a roller, which has the impression on a cylinder of what you want to have. You can feed the plain card in, then out it comes with a nicely embossed pattern on it. So even like wallpapers that sometimes have like an embossed pattern on it will be made using this method. It's a way of more mass manufacturing embossed card. Or if you're doing it for a little bit, like you just want to have like one little logo stamped on, you can literally just get a die press like this. And that's just like, say, your logo in there. You just want to stamp it into a business card. You just put the business card into there, and you press down, and it'll just make a nice little deboss or emboss onto the card. Now, once you've done that, you might then decide you want to have some foil blocking. So foil blocking is like this. It's where you have like a ribbon of foil that would be, they come in rolls. You can do this with leather as well. Essentially what they do on books, leather-bound books. Now, what you'll have is just... you'll have like your card underneath like that. You put the ribbon on top. Then on here, you'll have the actual bit that you want to have foil blocked. So when this die goes down, it will press on the foil onto the area that you want to actually have foiled. This is also heated up. And that's what causes the foil to stick onto the card. And then when you take it off, it only leaves the foil on the areas that you want it to be left on. Now this works really nicely. It can have a beautiful effect. I've only done it with leathers myself, but it's really nice if you make like a nice sort of laptop sleeve or something, and you do some foil blocking on there. It can look really, really lovely. Now spot UV is very similar to foil blocking. Now spot UV is what we're seeing here. So it's where if you don't want to have a sort of metallic finish, but you want to have that sort of shimmery shine to a certain part, it might be you just want the text to be shimmery. So it's sort of like slightly camouflaged with the card, but then when you sort of tilt it at angles, it catches the light differently. So it works in exactly the same way. You have a sort of polyurethane sheet that's fed over the top. Use heat to then press down onto the areas where you want to have it, and then that then leaves the sort of the shiny plastic layer on the top. So it adds a really nice effect to it. Now then, we're into different printing techniques. Screen printing is a sort of good for small runs, batches, and when you're not trying to print at volume. So what you have is a silk screen. Here you put ink onto the top, then you have your template underneath, and then the paper, and then the base. And you'll see from the GIF here, once those go together, and the ink is forced through the template, it only then leaves ink in the area on the paper that you want it to be left in. So then you can remove that paper, you put a new one down, and you do the same thing again. Use the blade to press the ink over the template. Yeah, so it's great for small runs. It's almost like the prototyping version of printing. So prototyping prints, and it's good for like art prints. So sometimes, yeah, if you're having like a very much like a one-off or a unique or custom-made print, often high quality ones are done with screen printing, because they can actually print different colors at different times, because you can use the template to block off certain areas where you don't want, say, that color to be applied. So you build up the print gradually in layers of color. Now we're into the realm of commercial printing. This is like the mass manufacture version of printing. So think of this as like the injection molding version of paper printing. So what we've got here is it's sort of like drum-based printing. So you have these different wheels here that all revolve and rotate. And what happens is you have on the printing plate, you'd have whatever it is you're wanting to print. So say in this instance, you had like a giant letter A that would be wrapped around the cylinder, and it's sort of, this would be slightly raised up from the surface of the cylinder there. There's the axis of that, and then that will revolve around an axis. Now, the good thing is with this is that will just go round and round and round, and as it goes round, it will pick up ink from the analog scroll, which is from the ink bath. Then as it rolls up, it will then be calibrated to time perfectly, so then it leaves an impression on the paper, or as they call it, you can see there, the substrate, as the substrate is fed through and then back up. So this is great for very fast printing. This is like what they do for newspapers and stuff. And the advantage is that the paper can be printed on a curved surface. You can see the paper, the substrate is wrapped around the cylinder. And so that means you can constantly keep the paper moving the whole time. The paper doesn't need to stop to be printed. It can just be pushed through non-stop. So it's a very, very quick method of printing. The big downside is setup is expensive and slow. And that can cause a lot of waste, because it can take a long time to calibrate, to get the pressure just right, to get the timing just right, and yeah, to make sure that the actual substrate that you're using is working correctly. So that's one of the hardest things with it. Yeah, so this is only really good for what we call long runs. So that's like where you're printing like newspapers and magazines and stuff. And the other good thing is you can print on a wide variety of substrates. So yeah, that's what we mean by that is different thicknesses of paper, different finishes, like ones that have been coated with a laminate or something like that. Yeah, you can print on all sorts of finishes. Yeah, once they're up and running though, they are actually quite low maintenance. They kind of run themselves as long as the ink wells are kept topped up. They kind of run themselves. And what you'd have with this is you'd have different colored inks in the different baths. So you might have different rolls where you would have different 4 different print chambers set up like this. So you might have, say, C, M, and then Y and K are in different ones. And the paper will be fed from one, then into another, then into another. And yeah, as you can kind of see it going on here, and as it goes, it's gradually adding the different colors. Then eventually out will come the fully finished print. Yeah. Now, offset printing. Oh, I missed one off. Sorry about that. Offset printing is, well, it's, to be honest, it's really similar. Offset printing is, yeah, essentially it's only really done on a flat surface, while flexographic can be done on a, yeah, it can actually be done on a curved surface, so it can be printed around a bend. Offset is where you'd have, say, rollers like this, and it'll flatten the paper or the substrate. So then when it goes through the printing press, yeah, it's actually sort of doing it on like a flat surface. So you'd have like the ink rollers on here, and it will feed the paper through on a flat plane to then print on. Yeah, but in terms of what it can do, it's very similar. Like, I mean, it's good for like high volume. I should do this in different colors, shouldn't I? It's great for like high volume runs. It's same pricey, expensive setup. Yeah, and it's pretty easy. Sorry, yeah, but it's fairly easy to change what you're printing. So these plates, as we call them, printing plates, can be changed quite easily, and that's a big advantage of that over flexographic. Okay, but guys, in essence, these are the 2 big commercial printing processes, especially in comparison to digital printing. Now, digital printing is the best quality that you will get without doing flexographic or flexography or offset lithography. Yeah, best quality instead of offset, for example. The reason being, you have individual ink cartridges up here where you have CMYK and then maybe a gray as well. And then those are like individual inks that then get fed into a print head, and the print head will just move from side to side gradually as the paper is fed through. It can print on a wide variety of substrate. And the actual print quality is very, very high. So we call that DPI, which is dots per inch. Yeah, the DPI level with this kind of printing is incredibly high. So you can feed in a document straight from, say, Adobe InDesign or Adobe Illustrator into a massive, I mean, this is printing like A0 or larger or super A0. And this is what's called a roller printer. And yeah, and it will just print it. And so imagine this is great for prototype or one-off printing. Yeah, one-off is great, because if you've got it set up in your office, you can literally then just press print. There'll be a big roll of paper on the back behind. It will just feed non-stop into the printer there. And then it will also have a knife where it will then cut off the print once the print's finished. Now, the quality is amazing with this. It's really, really high quality prints you can get. And you can get some really lovely quality papers as well on substrate. You can get like gloss finish, matte finish, satin finish. And it's brilliant for large format printing. So essentially with a printer like this, the maximum width might be A0 landscape, but the length that you're printing can be almost anything, because it'll just keep printing until it gets to the end of the document size, and it will just slice it off. So you can actually then print what we call like a panorama. So this might be like A0 width here. But then this dimension here could be like, you know, meters and meters, X meters long. It can be absolutely enormous. And then that's great if you want to have like a massive, huge sort of panorama photograph or vector graphics printed on. So it's good for like advertisement billboards and things like that. All right, I need to make sure that this says Papers finishes Quizlet, not Woods. Well done for bearing with it, guys. That's a really good effort for watching. Thank you very much. Just get in touch if you have questions.